Okay, we've still got a couple more minutes. Jack's just gone for a short walk, but he'll be back in 2 minutes.
Has to get those stretches in before moderating.
Yeah, limbering up. Okay, that's all working. Okay, I'll leave it with you, Jack.
Are we going live?
We're now muted.
We're already live.
Oh my God.
It's over to you.
Okay, so welcome back. This is the last session of Hybrid Live Coding Interfaces Workshop. And so the theme of this final session is live notation. And the first talk is going to be from Sukanya Aneja. So I will just see if I can find the presenter.
Hey, just trying to get my webcam to work.
Okay, we can hear you at least. That's a good start.
There we go. I think that's working. Hey, let me also see if I can share my screen.
Yep.
And I think that works. Okay, we're in infinite feedback mode.
Seems good to go. I will hand over to you.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you so much. And this has been like amazingly inspiring. Really nice to be here. So Inverse is, it's an esoteric programming language that it looks like poetry and compiles to shaders to generate visuals. And it's I've been working on this for maybe just a few months, so it's still very much a work in progress. But I'm going to start with just showing you a little demo. And there's a chance you might have seen this before. So it lives in a web interface. And this is not me freestyling. This is a demo that I've sort of worked out all the little kinks to beforehand. So just a little bit about esoteric languages to start with, and then I'll get into the technical details of this. So this is the language Intercal, which is, I think, one of the first esoteric languages. And I think the idea with it is, or with a lot of esoteric languages, is kind of questioning the sort of assumptions and the design of programming languages, and the focus on utility and efficiency. So this was sort of drawing attention to the commanding nature of esoteric languages at that time. This was made in 1972. So you can probably notice the use of the word please. And if you don't use the word please enough, it gives you an error. And if you use it too much, it also gives you an error. This is one that you might be familiar with already. This is brainfuck that has exactly 8 characters. So it completely sort of obfuscates the meaning of the program to the human reader, but for a computer, it's of course perfectly legible. And then this is the language Piet and light pattern, both of them sort of playing more with visual notation as language. So light pattern uses, you give it a folder of images and it analyzes those images and therefore determines the commands. Inverse is kind of based more on languages like this, which is Chef, where the program looks like a recipe. And this is another one in similar sort of vein, which is called Shakespeare, where a program looks like a play. And they kind of possess this property of multi-coding, where the program has 2 meanings at the same time. So when I started out with this, I was sort of most drawn to those kind of languages, and I started thinking about what I'm calling a manifesto as such, but just sort of what was going to inform my design decisions as I was making it. And the first one was that the idea that the code should be as interesting as the artifact it attempts to create, which is kind of what one can see with these previous languages, where just reading the code itself is it's saying something, or it's doing something. The second, that there should be countless ways of writing the same program, which, I mean, even for mainstream languages, this is already sort of true, but I kind of wanted it so that each different way of writing the program could have a completely different interpretation to a human reading it. A programmer must embrace uncertainty and a lack of control. I think this is just a very sort of personal decision that I think this is important. And that the output should be relatable to a broad audience, not just programmers. So I think with a lot of esoteric languages, they're fun because it's a really constrained problem space, and it's fun for programmers to try to, you know, kind of write a program with one hand tied behind their backs. But I wanted to see if I could kind of make something that that illuminated a little more about this world to people who might be new to programming or not as familiar with it. And this was kind of the sort of essence of what I was going for. I wanted it to look like poetry, or possibly look like poetry. So a couple of the sort of design decisions, which, I mean, given the audience, I feel like this is kind of stuff that one would know already. But the first was around using a stack-based paradigm, which was basically to get around this notion of variable assignment, because I couldn't figure out a way to make this work with natural language without it looking super contrived. So instead of, you know, saying things like x is 12, it's x is 10 and y is x squared plus 3x, there's a stack and it uses a reverse Polish notation. So just by keeping track of the order that one has put items into the stack, they can be retrieved and operated on accordingly. The second was around shaders, which again, I think a lot of you might be familiar with. But a shader essentially takes the x and y coordinate of a pixel, and I haven't put it here, but there's time as well to create animations. And it tells the pixel what color to be, just based on those 3 numbers coming in. And this happens in parallel for all of the pixels. So in some sense, it's extremely expressive, because with just a little bit of math, one can sort of create very expressive visuals. The third decision was sort of around the vocabulary. So when I started this, I just sort of like chose words that I thought were easy for me to remember while I was making the language. So plus was hug or love, and minus was discard or reject. Though this like created very repetitive sounding programs, and it made a very sort of constrained problem space. And I realized that this could be entirely left up to the writer to choose exactly how they wanted to, the sort of lexicon they wanted to use. The live coding aspect actually sort of came up accidentally. So while I was developing this, I needed a way to kind of test how things were going. And so I just like threw together something that would just allow me to, you know, refresh the browser. And I realized that this was actually like a really, really important part, because I mean, my experience with learning shaders has been through interfaces that allow me to kind of play around a little more. And that's what's kept my interest. So I ended up making a sort of the web interface that you saw for this after this little experience of seeing how important this part was. And so I will just continue with a little demo. So in the interface, there's you can see like there's this word table here, which maps the English words onto GLSL function names. But you can also go here and create your own word table. And there's also like some existing word tables, which I sort of created by just extracting words from bodies of text. I'm going to just show you a little bit what my process is when I've been using this. Though from what I've seen of other people use it, it has been quite varied, which is exciting for me to see. So let's see if I can. I basically start by, instead of like trying to come up with a whole context, just taking the words that I want and taking it from there. I guess I should also mention here that the way one writes numbers in this language is through a specific use of punctuation, so that there's no sort of numbers interrupting the poetry and the look or feel of it being, you know, prose or poetry, whatever it is. I'm going to keep quiet for a second so I can concentrate now while I'm doing this. Gotten rusty at this already. This used to be easier. It's been a little while. Give me a second. Okay. So this is kind of generally how I would start. Since I know how to write shaders, I'm thinking about it from the point of view of a shader that I want to write, finding the words. And then this kind of functions as a sort of scaffolding for trying to, like a constraint-based writing exercise almost. One of the other things that I put into the interface was the ability to sort of shuffle what that mapping is, which just changes the visual output completely. And I mean, often like it'll give you a blank screen. And something else I guess I should mention at this point is using a stack-based paradigm, there's only like one real error that one can get, which is a stack underflow when there's not enough data. So I'm handling that by just returning a random number. So in that sense, the program can never crash, which is also what allows this shuffle functionality to work. And then I baked in some example stacks here so that it's easier for people coming into this to be able to start making something without putting any kind of opinion on what word table they should use or what lexicon they should use. So I'll show you a little bit of what people have been making. This was a friend who had not had any experience with shaders, and I think his way of sort of approaching this was really by using that shuffle function a lot and then kind of seeing what would pop up on the stack by shuffling it and sort of observing what functions seemed interesting and then trying to play with those. This was another friend who did this really interesting thing with just the ordering of the words, which I was like the layout of the words, which I was completely taken aback by because I hadn't thought about it.
So Kanya, time's up, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I had minimized it,
That's
so
okay.
I couldn't even see.
No worries.
Okay, give me like 30 seconds. I'll just quickly
Sure.
wrap up. I guess like in the context of what really started making me think about the performative aspect of this was this particular one, which was, I think this was the first time someone used it, recorded what they made with it, and then sent it to me. I did want to share Kofi because I know he's here, and but this is, I'm going to very briefly share, but this is in French, so there's the option of expanding this to be more than just English. And so, like I was saying, yeah, work in progress. There's a lot of these sort of ideas that I have of where I want to take it and like different things that could, come out of it. But yeah, I will stop. And let me pull that window back.
Thanks very much. That's amazing. Such a nice project. So yeah, please chime in with your questions. So we've got two already. Question from Alex. I don't understand shaders or stack programming, but can understand the input as poetry and output as visual pattern. This is actually a nice feeling, but how important is understanding the language to you?
I mean, the way I've seen people use it is actually people who are new to programming, who have zero experience with shaders, who've never as much as heard of a stack-based paradigm or anything beyond like maybe the first language that they've been introduced to. And they were able to have fun with it, which for me was kind of unexpected, but it was super encouraging because I was I think that's a really nice little feature for people to be able to sort of mess around. And I think part of that is, one, the instant feedback, and two, that the program doesn't crash. So you can't do anything wrong. For me, coming from the shader background, I can't help but want to write a shader, and then I have to go about it that way. I haven't been able to break out of that sort of thought pattern.
Cool. I was wondering, have you thought about trying to introduce additional sort of poetic constructs like phonetics or rhyme, and also sort of like syllabic form like haiku and so on?
To some extent. So actually, one of the things that's happening right now, going back to what I was saying earlier about wanting there to be some unpredictability, there's the randomness in it, like when the stack generates a random number, it is a sort of deterministic random, and it's based on the number of words in each line. So if you and me are writing the same shader, just by the poetry we choose to write, like the flavor of our writing will sort of change the colors to some degree in the form. But that was sort of one space where I was thinking it could be interesting to explore that more, and then interesting also if it can support multiple languages or multiple scripts, like in terms of how the rhythm of a language might be different.
And I was also wondering if you've shared this back with the ESOLang community, if that's like a community that you're part of as well.
I haven't been a part of it. It's very recently that I sort of started diving into this world, but someone whose work, Daniel Temkin, whose work had inspired a lot of this, I have shared it with him and a few other people and gotten a little feedback here and there, but it's still at that stages of kind of, I'm struggling now to find time to keep working on it.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we need to move on to the next presentation, but thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Okay, and so next up we have Luke on the list. Virtual claps for a second. And I think Luke should be popping up any second. Luke, are you with us? Oh, yes. Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
So I think are you going to be presenting slides as well?
I will.
Okay. Let's get that set up.
One moment. I will start by introducing myself. My name is Luke Demarest. I'm based in London, and I'm a visual artist. I make interactive installations and computationally generated sculptures and prints. And as a researcher, I do a lot of agent-based modeling, and I teach at the School for Product Computation in New York City. I'm sharing an interface for live notation, and I think I'll start with a video to give context. Oh, do I have access to share my screen?
Yeah, I think you should be
unmuted.
able to do that.
You are now muted.
Might need Shelley or Alex to jump in, as I'm not
You are now unmuted.
extremely familiar with how this works. Where is that in the interface, Alex?
I'm getting a permissions error. Great. It still has a lock. Let's see.
Yeah, I guess Luke's just reloading browser. The system's been pretty reliable up to now, so it seems there still are occasional glitches.
Let's see. I will do a quick download of my slide deck and then upload it, because I still have a permission error. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, that might actually be it. It might, yeah, you might need to allow your browser to share your screen.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, it looks like it's, yeah, there we go.
You are
Okay,
now
great.
muted.
Sorry for the delay. So as you saw in the video, Logophone is an interface. It's light-based, it's electronic, and it allows a performer to use augmented drawing gestures to add improvisational audio visuals to whatever your live coding practices already may be. I usually think of it as addressing a certain gap in artistic control that I want to have when I'm live coding. So if I'm working with tightly structured patterns, I often want something that's a bit more loose, but not as it's like more less structured than explicit patterns, but not as but more structured as pseudo-random or noise functions. Getting a bit tongue-tied here. And I want these types of sounds and visuals to be asynchronous from like the global clock cycle. And I'm thinking of using it as if it were like salt with cooking. So that would be food without salt, or like a whole composition without salt can be bland. And if you have salt without any food, that's not really a meal. But if you use the right amount of salt, you can really make a meal pop and make certain flavors come out. So it's kind of like an addition to an overall composition than kind of something on its own. So internally, there's a Raspberry Pi cluster. So 4 Raspberry Pis that connect over a wireless network, and 8 LEDs. That's 2 per Pi. And the reason for that is I've redirected the audio channels from HDMI or to headphone jack to GPIO pins to use pulse modulation. And with each one, since it's less and it can run pure data headless, I can send data over OSC or SSH in and play sub patches that PWM audio into these LEDs and these lights instead of to like traditional speakers. And I can control it from my computer or something else, but it's like an add-on to a larger system interface with visuals as well. And the other half of it is these photocell soldered headphone jacks. So it basically allows you to pick up the light, which is also the data in the system, and control it from there. So this is like a schematic internally. So this bit here is a Hutu, which is a power bank and a wireless network. And I have a controller Raspberry Pi that then kind of sends out signals to the sub-Pis, which then have patches to each audio channel, which then go to an individual LED. And since this is like a cluster hat, you can incrementally build up with new nodes or decrease them, which it can be used for installations or instruments. And then on the other end, here's a schematic of the photocell soldered to the headphone jack, and kind of looking at what the right configuration that was for when using just headphones, since some of them have different pin orderings. And this is an example of being used in a gallery, in a installation setting. You don't need amplification. You can just wear headphones and directly have the audio data coming in, which can make for some nice interactions. And the basic principle here is that pulse width modulation, as the sensor gets closer, it's able to pick up the frequency of the light's vibration. And then the amplitude is dictated by the closeness of the sensor to the LED. Yeah, and the LED, like, we hear differently, and so sometimes when lights look static or always on, they're actually flashing at a rate, but we can't necessarily sense that with our eyes. And this is building up from experiments on smaller microcontrollers up to Raspberry Pis, so they simulate voices of humans, things like that.
Luke, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up in the next 30 seconds or so. Sorry.
That is perfect. And then I've been working on using extra sensors for things like if this can interface with dance or other types of systems. And this is Logophone, a light-based electronic interface. Thanks.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much, Luke. And yeah, sorry for the technicals in the middle. I really love the your like approach to documentation in particular with this project. And I wanted to just start by asking you, like, you know, how deliberate is that for you, and how does that affect your kind of practice?
The documentation.
Yeah, as in like, you know, speaking for myself, I often get to the end of the project and I'm like, oh my God, how do I even explain? I didn't take any photos, you know, all of that. But it seems like you've done exceptionally well on that front.
Thank you. I think having my particular background in art, I am like always sketching to try and like give a visual schematic or something that can bring me back to the main idea. But the most helpful thing I've done recently, which I know Rafaela has also done, is I did a workshop with Marjorie Ballman, and she's working on a book all about documentation and mapping how you map and see your systems. And that was extremely helpful. So a shout out to her if you're out there in the internet. That like has really helped, especially with this project, of making things clear and giving direction to the current and the future iterations.
Thanks. And we have a question from Alex. Great to have audio through light. Do you find interference from other lights is a problem?
The nice thing about these little tiny sensors is that they have like a threshold of what they can sense. And so as long as it's like generally controlled within my kind of like bubble of area, it's not too much interference. But what is fun is you can hold up these types of sensors to any lights, and you hear the frequency of the light bulb or things like that. But it's just a matter of kind of like tuning and getting the right levels.
Cool. And then I can't resist asking one more question.
Yeah.
I was really drawn to how in this project you're using like very micro gestures, and I'm just wondering if that was like deliberate, or did that just come out of naturally how these components function, and whether you're thinking of scaling up the gestures in any way in the future.
Yeah, I think that comes out of like just drawing practices, but then also when making, always like kind of tapping or having like keeping beat. And I think that it almost feels like it works on top of those really subtle movements. And I am right now with the pandemic, there's some like limited space for trying larger interfaces, but I'm interested in kind of like making one idea is a floor of lights and having these like on feet. And so as you walk, you compose, and that kind of gives new types of, we'll say, gestural language.
Amazing. Great. Well, I look forward to seeing that in the future. And yeah, thanks very much for your presentation, Luke.
Thanks. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Thanks again.
All right. And so next up we have Olivia. Hello, Olivia.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Over to
great.
you.
And I've been having internet issues all day, so hopefully they're gone now. So I'm going to be sharing a project I just kind of started, or I don't even know if I would call it a project, just some initial investigations, but into this idea of scribble functions, or I've been calling them fubbles. And so I recorded a just video with no audio of me kind of playing around with this idea. And basically, I wanted to explore drawing as an interface to create sort of control parameters within a running program. And often when I'm live coding, I use sequences of parameters, or maybe things like sinusoids to control values over time. And I'm here in this video, I'm showing it in Hydra, but I actually especially want to try this idea with sound, but I started exploring it in Hydra. And so that's Hydra code on the left. On the right is sort of this, where the light blue line is sort of this drawing area. And down at the bottom is also sort of a visualization of the X and Y position over time within the drawing. And so usually in Hydra, you can have sort of a sequence of numbers within an array, and that's how you might change a certain value over time. And then you can, make that array go faster. And you could also use a function as a parameter for anything that's a number. So you could use a sign of time, for example, or any other function as a parameter for a value that's a number. But to me, it's sort of, I always end up like getting hung up on, okay, I want a sign, but I want it to do this, and I want it to do, I wanted to do another thing. So I want to explore kind of replacing that function with this thing that you can draw. And so right now it's actually using it's using the X position in time to control the scale of the square. That 0 and 5 there are specifying the range, the minimum and maximum that the function value is being scaled up to. And so here I have it kind of set up to take the input live and loop the drawing that you did in time. So in that sense, it's also a little bit like a live looper. Yeah, I'm not sure how clear it is, all the things that are happening right now, but that F0 is a function corresponding to this, this drawing. And the first parameter is the minimum that function is being mapped to, and the second parameter is the maximum. And then the third parameter is how fast it goes. And so the idea with this is that I could use the same function to control different parameters, but change various aspects of that, such as the speed or the scaling of it. So now I'm adding a second function or draw function or fubble to control the color. And so there, the drawing that I'm making on the right is controlling the colors. And so as you're drawing, you could kind of sync up one drawing with another. And this is, I've had this idea in my head for a while, but I just made it for the first time basically this week. And so I think I'm really also exploring how there's a lot happening on the page and sort of how all these things fit together. And maybe there's too much happening all the time.
Olivia, you still have like 4 minutes left, so if you did want to keep going, then go for it.
Oh yeah, I'm letting the video play a little, but maybe I'll go a little further. Let's see. So of course, I like to add feedback to a lot of things, and so I'm still just using these drawings that are on the right within this program as it's running, but they're sort of leaving a trace of what's happened within the drawing. And I guess something I want to explore more is the idea of like a drawing is sort of an accumulation of strokes. And so I like using this with some feedback because kind of the idea that as I'm leaving a series of strokes on a page, that they're sort of building up into what you see on the screen. So there you can see the scale of this square in the middle is being controlled by the drawing on the right. And something I find with programming is often it's really easy to do kind of really clean things, and then you have to kind of work hard to get noise. And so I like, for me, this way of working, of sort of starting with something messy, and I could see in the future, you know, applying some smoothing to the lines as needed, or quantization or other kind of more mathematical things. But I kind of like the intuitiveness of the drawing aspect of it. And so now I'm using the drawing to control the scroll amount in the background of the feedback. And maybe actually we could just go to questions, and I'll just leave the video playing in the meantime.
All right, great. Wow, you've hacked the presentation so you get 2 more minutes of questions. So yes, let's go to questions. So I think we have questions in YouTube. We have Soren Peter. This is so cool. I agree. Could you make it output OSC or MIDI so it can easily be used for other tools? And second question from Soren, how to add a Z-axis?
Yeah, I definitely I would like to make it something that would output OSC and MIDI and be able to use in other tools. And I think a Z-axis could be something like pressure. And I also think speed in a drawing is really interesting. So like the change between one point and the next, which isn't really a Z-axis, but it's not open source right now, or I haven't uploaded it yet because I'm still just working it out. But it's something I imagine that could be on its own to use with other things.
Right, and we have a question from Paula. Is it emitting sound by now? And yeah, I guess have you done any sound experiments with this yet?
I have not done any sound experiments with this yet, but and I'm kind of like still learning about sound in general, but there's a lot of things I sort of want to try with it, like from drawing envelopes of sound, or drawing sort of having the values correspond to a pattern in time within a sound, and maybe then kind of quantizing it. So only taking discrete numbers from the overall drawing, but it's definitely something I want to try next.
And so yeah, Luke is also asking about input methods. I was wondering if you considered like, you know, like other sorts of like gestural input beyond drawing, so you could be sort of like using your body as an input for this type of interaction.
With this, I actually specifically want to focus on drawing and the idea of a line, because I use a webcam sort of a lot, and that's to me a different sort of gestural interaction. But I think there's kind of two pieces to what's going on here. There's the drawing a line in time, and then there's also kind of looping that and re-recording. And I think that idea of looping could also apply to other gestural inputs. And I right now I've only been using it's not emitting sound right now at all. And this was just with a mouse, but it would be a lot more fun with some other form of drawing, like a tablet or something, or multi-touch maybe.
And the last one from Charlie, saying this could also be fun to have the fubbles feedback on themselves. Self-modifying fubbles sounds like a great title for a paper.
Self-fubbling fubbles. Yeah, and I think also like composing the functions together, or but I like kind of I'm still experimenting with this visual right now. There's sort of almost 3 ways of seeing the same thing. There's this line, and then but in the line you don't really see the changes in time, and then there's these graphs with the dot, and then there's actually what it's doing in the code. And I think these different ways of seeing things are sort of different ways of understanding a function or a change in time. And so I think, yeah, there could be fun things like have the fubble itself.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Olivia. That's very, very cool. And can't wait to see this out in the wild.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is our final presentation coming up next from Kofi. We'll make Kofi the presenter, and he should pop up any moment. And while we're waiting, just to remind people that after Kofi's talk, we're going to stick around for another 30 minutes or so for discussion/party. I think it's probably aiming more towards the discussion at the moment, but who knows? Maybe we'll get some self-fubbling fubbles on the go. Okay, we can see Kofi, but I'm not sure we can hear you yet. Oh no, can't hear you at the moment, Kofi. Let's see if we can figure that out. So it doesn't say that you're muted, so it might be on your side rather than in the...
Yeah, you could hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Whew. Okay, so I think I'm ready. Hold up, let me make sure. Okay, we're good. We're good to go. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kofi. I reside from Montreal. You can follow me at Ellis Preacher. So today I'm going to be presenting live writing, live coding the audience. As we heard before today, a lot of what live writing is about is this notion that I've been hearing in many events that I've been going through lately, where code is poetry, poetry is code. Code is expressions where the experiment roams. And a lot of live coding does deal with this notion of where we're experimenting and expressing ourselves in code in many different mediums and outputs, such as visual, sound, text, performance, dancing, textile objects, robotics, making your own instruments. There's a big notion of experiment and expressions. Expressions, experiments, and play. And for me personally, what I like to do a lot when I do a lot of live coding performances or even some of my poetry and non-live performance is play, 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 play. And the reason why I like the notion of play is because I realize that sometimes when we get into adulthood, sometimes we're too anxious or there could be some stuff when we're approaching things. But whenever you tell someone, you know, let's have fun, let's play, sometimes you get some of the most in-depth, the most random, the most unexpected results. And that is what I like most about live coding. So I was thinking of a way to implement that in a notation that can express itself with interaction or reflection. Can I do a live coding environment that someone can do in a workshop? Or can someone can do, like, if they're in room of 5 and they want to play like a mini game, is there a way we can live code that experience? Something that's collaborative, not only in terms of the person coding, but as well as the audience, because sometimes the audience has a lot of intake. And of course, the typical randomness that you see throughout round coding. And a little thing that I wanted to add into the live writing is the notion of misdirection. And why do I have the philosophy? What's the philosophy behind this? First, I really like the concept of book versus movie, because you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I love the book, but I didn't love the movie." And a lot of times it's like, "Oh, I didn't expect the terrain to be like this. I didn't expect the character to be like this." And I wanted to take that notion of when you read a book, you are creating the experience for yourself. So, and this goes in with the colors and shape. If in the book it says the person was entering on the snowy day into a pub and was drinking a red tea. The definition of snow depends on where you're from. I'm from Montreal, so my definition of a very hard snowy day, we're talking maybe 35, 40 centimeters. But if you're somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, or you're in the desert, maybe snow can mean 5 centimeters. And the same thing about the color red. To me, the color red could be vibrant, but to some people, it could be a rose, it could be maroon, it could be a color that's close to orange, and we might be debatable. And this goes in with relatability and bias. So I wanted a language, or rather an output that explores these biases, so everybody can gain their own unique preferences. And outside of live coding, I've been experimenting this where sometimes if I'm doing a poetic show or not, and I have to post it up like gallery, I will use different colors and different heights just to play around. And it's very interesting to what people gravitate, because normally when people go into a gallery, they're used to seeing black and white text. So they think they have to read in order. But when you start playing around with heights, play around with misdirections, like this text will be yellow on black, the next will be blue on yellow, or red on gold, people start relating to the poem, sometimes not even based on what you write or what they see, based on, oh, that color's a color I like, so I gravitated towards that. So that's something I really want to explore in this program. Oh. And these are some of the things that I do want as outputs in it when it comes out, where, like, as you can see, red is written in yellow and it's misspelled. So is square, top left corner is in the middle, because I do think having these kinds of misdirections, since we're so used to symbols and patterns, it would be nice to break these patterns and see how the audience reacts to them. And some terms that I would like to have in this notation that I have been working on with Luis from the Now Lab at McMaster is having different terms that promote people to be live coded. So he suggested the term parkour, which is just people to switch up the thing. So let's say I'm live coding people that are in a writing workshop. Parkour will be something where you randomly go to the next person's paper and you continue off their poem. And then we have timers that every set that you're writing or dancing to, or whatever is the theme or topic that was coded before, you interact within that code, and once the timer is done, you flip to the next, have reflections and modifiers, which you see typically in a lot of programming languages. But with this one, the modifiers will be like, let's say during the writing, delete line 35 or add an extra sound. And it's really based on the notion that everything can be inspiration. So what we heard through the past 2 days is open knowledge. We heard a lot about jam culture, the observation, internalization of the mundane, finding ways to be random, assessing feedback, critique to push forward. But one thing that I think is really important, and is shown in almost all the speeches in the last 2 days, is that live coding is not a result-driven practice, but a process-driven practice. And I think that is where I'm gravitating towards to with this. Is something that's so process driven that even the audience, every time they were to see a performance, they themselves will realize they're part of it, and how they think about it will be different. So once the performance done, the discussions will be noted in different ways. So now I end this with poetry is code, code is poetry. This translation occurs daily. It happens naturally. What is your current rhyme scheme? What is your current code block? What is your internal tempo? What's your internal clock? And that's it for my presentation. And I guess we can start the questions, because I think that was under 10 minutes.
It wasn't indeed under 10 minutes. So yeah, thank you very much, Kofi, for your presentation. And I love the color schemes on the slides. It's like woken me up at the end of the session.
The color schemes was just to actually show, I'm happy that you realized that, because the thing I really wanted to note that when we're working on this language more and more is that I'm going to try to play around with different texts. So my slide was purposely disjointed to show how just by having a disjointed slide, you will get a reaction. You said it made you awake, Jack. Some other people might be like, oh, you had a spelling mistake. Oh, why did you really have to misspell square? And these are things that I do want to implement in the language as little wake up or little teasers for the audience.
Brilliant. And I think I see a lot of connections between some of what you've been saying and some of the other talks in this session. Like Olivia saying how when you have a programming language or a system like that, it's easy to make things very neat, and actually the challenge is to make it kind of noisy and introduce errors in a meaningful way. And I'm just wondering if those sort of themes are in your thoughts as well when you're thinking about some of these ideas.
Yes, they're not only in my thoughts, they really are like the main elements of my thoughts because when I do a live coded performance, since I don't have live writing at the moment, I will hand people out cue cards that have the most randomest things. And sometimes people be like, yo, it will be some silly things like dog versus cat. Or my favorite story is that one I had a cue card that said, how would it be like to work in a sewer pipe for 5 hours a day? And the irony is the guy who got that card actually did work in sewers. So he was telling me the whole time he was listening to my presentation, he was just envisioning his whole day in a sewer. And then someone else that was a scientist got a science-based question. So these are the type of feelings, emotions that I want to like try to get post performance, like that reflection, like, oh wow, this didn't match, but it did match. You know, try to play on the biases that we usually play with.
Cool. And a question from Alex. Oh, Alex says, sorry, I wasn't sharing the slides to the YouTube watchers at the start. Could you please share the first couple of slides again quickly?
Yeah,
he said the talk was so vivid that he didn't realize.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Yeah. So yeah, there go. So I'm just going to share some of the slides.
And Kofi, I also wanted to ask, so in our call, we were kind of soliciting like speculative design as an approach, and I think you were one of the main people to kind of call that out in your response, to say that you are taking kind of a speculative approach, and I found that really interesting. I just wanted to ask you how that was for you. Is that something that you already do a lot in your existing practice, and how did it work for you in this context?
Oh yeah, I do a lot of that in my insistent practice because I also do freestyle poetry. So if you ever see my performances or whatnot, what I like to do is freestyle words, ask the audience for words. So that is something I do in my normal practice. But also a lot of this came from actually 2019 ICLC because I remember like a couple pivotal points. So remember Alexandria was talking about parkour, and I was thinking in my head, oh, it would be cool to have live coding things. And I remember later that night we were all talking about it would be cool to be live coding in underwater or on an airplane. And then I remember I was talking to Kate, and the first thing I asked her after her presentation on the dance, and I'm like, do you ever try to tease the dancer by like doing something that is like on like no human can keep up, but just to see how they interact? Or even a convo I had with Felipe where we're like, it would be cool to have a live coding thing that was just based on like trying to control someone without letting them know that you're controlling them by live coding and see what you can like make someone react. So these are things that I have been pondering about since then. And also someone had a paper on meditative live coding. So it would be cool to have a live coding environment language that wasn't really based necessarily on music or sound or necessarily text, but based on a reflective sector if possible as well.
Brilliant. And maybe that's actually a good note to kind of move straight into the discussion, talking about the future and what could be, and speculating a bit. So stay on the line, Kofi, because we're going to invite back some of the speakers from these past two sessions, and also I think we're going to share the link to this chat to people in YouTube so that they can also come on here, and because they've been watching the past few days, and we wanted to invite them back as well. So Alex and Shelley, I'm not sure exactly how to make this happen in the BBB. So I don't know if you guys want to come back as well.
You are now unmuted.
So yeah, if anyone who's still here wants to come and share their webcam, don't be shy. And so the idea that we had to kick this off was just to sort of reflect on the call that we made, partly because we're curious about how people thought about it, but just also as kind of a starting point. So maybe we could start. Oh, Simon's joining as well. So yeah, maybe Olivia, we could start with you. So yeah, I guess question is, what do you think about this idea of like hybrid live coding interfaces, and yeah, what did you think about the call and the brief that we sent out?
There's my son. Honestly, I'm still sifting through everything. I'm really inspired, and I think I missed a lot of the presentations because my internet wasn't working today, so I need to go back and look at that and catch up. So start with someone else.
Okay, cool. Yeah, anyone else want to jump in on that question? All right, we'll nominate someone.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question was, what do you think about this idea of hybrid live coding interfaces? And yeah, what did you think about the call that we put out?
I think it's very interesting because a lot of the live coding languages are now being able to be pushed beyond live coding. So I know I talked to a live coder, Yekto Rodrigo, and he was like, I use Title all the time nowadays, but I don't even use it to live code. I use it as a composition tool. And then Olivia, as you see, sometimes what I do with Hydra is that sometimes with Hydra, I make it into like a graphic design sometimes. So instead of using like it as an animation tool, I have found out you can do like some graphic design, character designs if you're crafty enough. So playing around with how all these live coding tools are able to push the boundaries of not only live coding, but creative coding. And as we saw today, like the last 2 weeks, I took down notes on everyone talk. We had textile, robotic arms, people making their own instrument. I'm just like, damn, I'm like, I want to make an instrument too now, you know?
Yeah, I think it's not. I think that's absolutely right, and it doesn't just mean that live coding is being used for composition, but it's being used for something else somewhere between performance and composition, or just kind of disregarding these different terms and just trying new directions out. Because I guess we're kind of used to adopting these terms from traditional music, that you either compose something and write it down, or you perform it. But live coding, you do both all the time, and so it really kind of blends these two things, and I guess it's about a relationship with time and just taking things in different directions. I don't know how that relates to poetry, how live coding makes you think about poetry in different ways in terms of time in relation to performance time and composition time.
It does, because of so what I did in Ghana was I had people read the poem, and then I will live code, and then depending on what I was live coding, actually altered the speed on how people were reading poems. So I will live code, they will see me live code, and depending on the sounds or the images they saw, they will have a different expression of what they thought the poem meant. And depending on the visuals and the sounds that I have at that particular time of poetry, people take the poem to mean something else.
That's super nice.
Okay, yeah, we have Victor and Simon and Soren here from YouTube as well. So please feel free to jump in. Reflections on that question that I asked, but also reflections on any of the other pieces that you've seen.
I've just unmuted myself. I really enjoyed the some of the textile talks yesterday, actually. I mean, I know Alex has been working in that area, but just the linking between code and kind of current use of it in computing, and then going right back to some of those long song forms and stuff was like, yeah, and a sort of deep time media way, really refreshing and mind blowing, and that kind of connection with history I found really, really interesting. Just to kind of, I mean, I know I don't suppose the term new media is used so much anymore, but there's to kind of obliterate that and look at all these kind of strands is, yeah, really, really great for me.
Well, what I really enjoyed, especially in this last session, was this very attention to details of, especially of the languages that were presented. I mean, as I said, I'm totally a newbie here. I don't have much experience, but it really seems that everyone is presenting something that is related to live coding, but the details are so different because there's no one-size-fits-all solution here. And I'm so impressed by this. People that are, working with something that is hardware, or people that are just creating something visual, or people that just want to transform the means of live coding, maybe get a little bit of distance from the computer, going a little bit closer to language. And it's something I never considered before. And as a programmer and musician, I think it's really inspiring in a sense to break these boundaries and try to do something a little bit different from what I usually do. And I hope, likewise, I hope I was able to share a little bit of my vision too, and so that some of us can kind of exchange here.
You are now unmuted.
I think you're muted, Shelley. So she's upset now. I might take this opportunity to make a point. That's yeah. Yeah, I guess it's nice to think of these talks. I guess it's easy to think of these things as metaphors, saying, yeah, codes like poetry, codes like textile, codes like drawing. But I think what we're seeing is that code really is poetry and really is drawing and really is textile. It's not just drawing metaphors, but actually making clear what has always been the case. Maybe hidden a bit in software engineering, but once you see things in wider cultural contexts, you see that when you're writing words, playing with language, and when the language responds and changes, it becomes it becomes part of a longer history of creative development, I think. That's my point. We've lost Shelley completely now.
We also have Soren coming in and out.
Yeah,
please.
I just found something to tell. Like that it's getting more fuzzy, that you can make more like fuzzy operations with some of the tools we've seen these couple of days, especially Olivia's, but also some of the others is something I've been missing when I've been VJing for many years and started live coding like a year ago or so when I finally found it. And that's something I very often missed in like working with computers and having some kind of modulating, some kind of timeline or some kind of whatever your medium is. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to trying out those things. And yeah.
You are now unmuted.
Does my sound work again?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
you are now
great.
muted.
I've totally forgotten what I was going to say, but it was something about how what Victor said really chimes with what Kate said in the chat, which is that what's been interesting for me the last couple of days is how the word hybrid has led to a more interdisciplinary workshop. And I was just thinking about how live coding as a field has always sort of been keen to like push the boundaries of what it is that live coding is, and maybe thinking about hybridizing with other interfaces and other forms of creativity maybe lets us like explore the edges of live coding and not just like the center or the central practice, but like what the limits are, and sort of test new things out and new ideas within the context of live coding. I'm not sure if that's what I was going to say earlier or not, but now I've said it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I'm really glad that people have felt like they can explore in that way. I think it's really healthy, and I hope it continues. Paolo has just joined as well. You want to jump in, please do?
Should I say something?
Oh, I thought Paolo, I thought you were going to go ahead.
You are now unmuted.
Yeah, I think she's just switched computers, so she's a bit out of the conversation, so we might need to fill her in a bit.
We need some filler. So where do we go from here then?
Well, I guess I'd just like to agree with Kate that the word hybrid seems to have really worked. I think we weren't I guess it's always been a problem with ICLC that we've tried to make it interdisciplinary, but then there's been this very computer music focus, and there probably still has, but there's been less of a computer music focus, and it's and it's been nice to talk beyond particular disciplines. I think it's worked really well, which means I think that we should turn this one-off workshop into maybe a series. I think that'd be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. And there was also like some really nice submissions that we had that we weren't able to include as well. So really, really nice to keep exploring this topic and hearing about people's projects.
I think we need to talk about the abbreviation though, because it's currently HLCI, Hilke. So I don't know. We need to work on the aesthetic of that. It's quite funny how it contains CHI like Chi inside it, and it also contains like LCI like Eakly. So in a way, like the abbreviation itself is kind of hybrid of like Chi and Eakly as well. But yeah, bam. But I don't. Yeah, if anyone has any like catchier suggestions, I don't know. Maybe it's good as it is.
I really liked the format that it didn't need to be an academic proposal, for example, or fit into a specific category of a performance, a paper. Because I think that left a lot of room for sort of a wider variety of presentations.
And also space for works in progress and things as well. So that was really nice.
You are now unmuted.
Yeah, that was partly because we were unsure how much time people would have to put into a proposal, but actually I think we had enough from everyone to be able to evaluate the proposals and fit it together into a nice program. There's no need to ask people to write a whole paper, because often these are really speculative ideas, and so people end up just stringing out things into a whole paper and writing things which I haven't done yet, and then really sweating the night before a presentation trying to implement the thing that they've described in great detail. And it's nicer to just keep it as an idea and share the idea like that, I think. Yeah, and actually have the work done in the workshop itself.
I'm just catching up in the chat, and
yeah, there's quite a lot there.
There's a lot of chat going on. Kate has said that Julian's current definition of live coding is public thought. That's pretty deep. Julian's pretty deep.
I think that's a literal etymology of program thinking in public or writing in public or something like that. Yeah, it's Julian Rohrabaugh, a very modest guy who basically invented live coding around the turn of the century with the just-in-time library. Iris says, this conference has been amazing, so inspiring. Oh, thanks. It's nice to see the expansion of live coding to other types of devices or systems. Some of them proposes very interesting aesthetic and symbolic explorations. It was awesome to see you all. Thanks so much for sharing. Thanks, Iris, and thanks to everyone.
We've just had Mark join as well. Mark, do you want to jump in?
Nope. Yeah. Yeah, Mark doesn't have a mic.
It's kind of is a party then, isn't it? Because people just kind of like get
Yeah.
to hang out, don't really want to say anything.
Yeah, I think at this point there's more chat in the text chat than in the video chat. I think maybe at this point we should stop streaming. Anyone still watching the YouTube channel can join us in the chat, and that means we will no longer be recording and we'll no longer feel like we're performing and can then just maybe hang out.
So move into the green room.
Yeah.
Start the real work.
So thanks for watching those who are watching the archive. You're not going to find out what's going to happen next. What goes on in the video chat stays in the video chat, but it's been a good one. Okay, bye. Hang on, I'm not sure if that worked. Don't say any rude words yet. Yeah, I'm pretty